Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you thought it would last forever, but one day they left their ring on the table and walked away? This video is a journey of letting go, healing, and finding yourself again. The painful beginning. Imagine this. You wake up one morning in a quiet apartment. The coffee is ready. The bread is on the table. Everything looks normal, except for one small thing. On the wooden table, there is a ring. His ring. The one he promised would stay with you forever. And now, it is sitting there, shining like a cruel reminder that forever has an ending. You know, love stories rarely collapse with loud explosions. They usually die in silence. In the way two people stop laughing at each other's jokes. In the way dinners become quiet. In the way, good night, feels more like goodbye. That is exactly how her story began. The day he left the ring on the table in their little home in Copenhagen. Your brain, of course, hates this kind of pain. Science even says that heartbreak activates the same parts of your brain as physical pain. That's why you feel like someone is kicking your chest when, in reality, you're just staring at a tiny piece of metal on a table. In short, your nervous system is throwing a tantrum, because the future it imagined just got cancelled, and maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you've had a moment when something small, an empty chair, a text that never came, or a ring left on a table, broke your heart into pieces. This is where our story begins. Not with fireworks, not with screaming, but with silence, and a ring that said everything without words. The silent breakfast. Breakfast is supposed to be warm, right? The smell of coffee, the sound of bread crunching, maybe even a little joke across the table. But not this morning. On this morning in Copenhagen, the apartment was filled with silence so heavy it could crush a person. She sat at the small kitchen table. Across from her was an empty chair. The butter knife was untouched. The steam from the coffee faded into the air, like hope slowly disappearing. She wanted to say something, anything. But when love starts dying, words become strangers. Psychologists have a funny way of describing this. They say silence in a relationship is not peace. It's a warning sign. When people stop talking, it means they are already halfway out the door. It's like your brain giving up before your body does. And that's what she felt. He had been walking away long before he placed that ring on the table. That if you've ever had breakfast alone after someone left, you know the cruel details. The spoon feels too loud. The ticking clock becomes your only conversation partner. Even the sunlight feels colder. And in that moment, the silence doesn't just fill the room, it fills your chest. But here's the strange part. Silence also teaches you things words never could. It forces you to hear your own thoughts. It asks you questions like, what now? Who are you without him? The answers don't come fast, of course. At first, all she heard was the echo of her own heartbeat. Still, that empty breakfast table became the beginning of a new conversation, with herself. The ring on the wooden table. There it was. Small. Silent. Shining. The ring sat in the middle of the wooden table, like a final period at the end of a long sentence. No note. No explanation. just metal and silence. Sometimes the loudest words are the ones never spoken. For her, that ring was more than gold. It carried wedding vows, dreams of a small house, maybe even children running around in the yard. Every scratch on it was a memory. Every sparkle was a promise. And now, suddenly, it became evidence of something broken. Science has an odd way of explaining this pain. Your brain is wired to attach meaning to objects. That's why an old shirt smells like comfort. That's why a song can rip your heart open. And that's why one ring on one table felt heavier than the whole world. Her nervous system wasn't looking at jewelry, it was looking at a funeral of dreams. Maybe you've had an object like that. A photo. A text message. A gift. Something so small, but every time you see it, your chest tightens. That's how grief works. It hides in ordinary things. It makes everyday life feel like walking through a museum of pain, but here's the twist, that ring was also a teacher. It showed her that love, no matter how beautiful, cannot be forced to stay. A ring cannot chain a heart. A promise cannot glue a broken soul. In that moment, staring at the ring, she realized, sometimes letting go isn't weakness. It is survival. Memories of the early days. Before the ring on the table, before the silence, there were mornings full of laughter. She remembered the first days in Denmark, when everything felt like a beginning. They were young, hopeful, and maybe a little reckless. Copenhagen streets looked brighter when they walked together. Even the rain felt like a song instead of a storm. It's strange how the brain works. Neuroscientists say that we don't just remember events, we remember the emotions tied to them. That's why when she thought of their first date in a small bakery, she didn't just see croissants and coffee. She felt the warmth of his smile. She remembered the way her heart raced when he held her hand for the first time. Memory is sneaky. It edits out the fights, the tears, the bills unpaid. It plays highlight reels of the good times, like a cruel movie you didn't ask to watch. That's what nostalgia does. It convinces you that the past was perfect, even if it wasn't. And in those lonely nights after he left, she kept replaying those happy days, like an addict craving one more hit of love. Maybe you've done this too. Maybe you've scrolled through old photos, listening to a song that makes your chest ache, convincing yourself the past was golden. It's normal. Your brain is trying to protect you, giving you sugar before the bitterness. But here's the trick, living in memories is like trying to walk forward while staring at a mirror. You trip. You fall. You bleed. As she sat alone in her little apartment, the memories of the early days didn't just bring comfort. They brought a question she couldn't escape. If we were so happy once, why did it all fall apart? The moment he changed. Change doesn't arrive like thunder. It sneaks in quietly, almost politely, until one day you realize the person you love is no longer the same. That's what happened with him. At first, it was small things. He stopped asking about her day. He laughed less. His eyes wandered when she spoke, as if searching for another world behind her words. Psychologists call this emotional withdrawal. The body is still present, but the heart is already halfway gone. You can sit across from someone at dinner, but feel lonelier than being alone. That's the kind of loneliness that cuts the deepest. It's not about missing a person, it's about missing the version of them who used to care. She remembered the exact night she knew something had shifted. They were walking by the harbor in Aarhus. The water sparkled with city lights, but his face was dark, distant. She asked, "Are you okay?" He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. That's when her stomach dropped. Instinct told her, the man beside her was no longer the same man she fell in love with. Our brains are wired to notice these micro-changes. A pause too long. A smile too short. Even without evidence, your body knows the truth. It's survival. Evolution taught us to detect danger, and nothing feels more dangerous than love fading away. Maybe you've seen it too. A friend who doesn't call back. A partner whose texts turn from paragraphs to single words. These are not random accidents. They are signs. And ignoring them is like pretending a storm cloud is just a piece of art in the sky. For her, that was the cruelest part. The change didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, like winter stealing the color from autumn. Until one morning, all she had left was silence, and a ring left on the table. The unspoken pain. Pain is loud inside, but silent outside. She carried questions that never left her lips. Why did you stop loving me? Was it something I did? Was it something I didn't do? These questions burned like fire in her chest, but her mouth stayed closed. Why? Because silence often feels safer than rejection. Psychologists explain this as a defense mechanism. When you fear the answer might destroy you, you choose not to ask. It's like standing in front of a locked door. You know behind it may be the truth, but you're too afraid to turn the key. So, you keep standing there, holding your breath, pretending the door isn't there at all. That I end their last months together, she noticed the small gaps. He came home later. He smiled less. He touched her hand without warmth, like his skin was present but his soul was absent. Each time, she wanted to scream, "Tell me what's happening." But instead, she swallowed her words, collecting them like stones in her stomach. Here's the irony. Unspoken pain doesn't disappear. It grows. Neuroscience shows that suppressing emotions activates stress centers in the brain. That's why people with bottled-up feelings often feel exhausted, anxious, even physically ill. In other words, silence is heavy. It weighs on your body as much as your heart. Maybe you know that weight too. Maybe you've stayed quiet when you should have spoken. You nod, you smile, you act strong, while inside your mind screams. The world sees calm. Your body carries chaos. For her, the unspoken pain became a daily companion. It sat with her at the dinner table. It followed her into bed. It whispered into her ears when the lights went out, "He's already gone, and you're pretending not to notice." Alone in the small apartment. After he left, the apartment in Aarhus didn't just feel empty, it felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by memories. His jacket still hung on the chair. His books leaned against each other on the shelf. Even his toothbrush stood in the bathroom, like a cruel reminder that he was everywhere except with her. Loneliness is strange. It doesn't arrive as silence. It arrives as noise. The clock ticked too loudly. The fridge hummed like a sad song. Even the sound of her own footsteps echoed back at her, reminding her she was walking alone. Scientists say the human brain is wired for connection. When that connection is cut, the brain interprets it as danger, almost like starvation. That's why loneliness feels like hunger, but no food can fix it. She tried to fill the emptiness with small routines. She watered the plants. She folded laundry that only belonged to her now. She turned on the TV, not to watch, but to drown out the sound of her own thoughts. Yet every corner of the apartment whispered his absence. The bed was too big. The sofa too wide. Even the air too heavy. Maybe you felt this, too. Coming home to a place that used to be alive, only to find it turned into a museum of what once was. Every object, every corner, feels like it's mocking you. Look, he was here. Look, he loved you once. Loneliness doesn't just sit beside you. It wraps itself around your chest like a cold blanket. But here's the thing about being alone. It forces you to meet yourself. No distractions, no noise, no us, only you. And though it hurts like hell at first, sometimes the only way out of loneliness is to walk straight through it. That's the path she had to learn, step by shaky step, in that small apartment. The stranger's smile in the cafe. One rainy afternoon, she escaped her apartment and walked into a small cafe in Aarhus. The windows were fogged. The smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She sat by herself, staring at the steam rising from her cup, lost in the fog of her own thoughts, and then it happened. Something simple, almost too ordinary to matter. A stranger at the next table smiled at her. Not a romantic smile. Not a pitying one. Just a human smile that said, "I see you." It was such a small thing, but in her world of silence and emptiness, it felt like a spark in the dark. Psychologists often call this microconnection. Science shows that even short, positive interactions with strangers can lift your mood and reduce feelings of isolation. A smile. A kind word. A nod. Your brain, starved for connection, lights up like it has finally tasted water after a long drought. For her, that smile didn't erase the pain. It didn't make her forget the ring on the table or the empty apartment waiting at home. But it did remind her of something important. The world was still full of people. Not all love stories end in abandonment. Not all connections break. Sometimes, kindness comes from the most unexpected places. A stranger in a cafe, on a rainy Danish afternoon, maybe you felt it too. A cashier who says, "Have a good day," and really means it. A friend who sends a text at the exact moment you're falling apart. These are small lifelines, but they matter. They remind you that even when one person leaves, humanity doesn't. She walked out of the cafe that day still broken, but a little less alone. And sometimes, that's how healing begins. Not with grand gestures, but with one simple smile. The lesson from the ring. The ring never moved from the table. At first, she couldn't even look at it. It felt like a weapon, sharp and heavy, stabbing her each time her eyes found it. But days turned into weeks, and slowly, something shifted. The ring stopped being just a symbol of loss. It started to become a teacher. Objects don't change, but the meaning we attach to them does. Psychologists call this reframing. When you shift the story you tell yourself about an object, you shift the power it has over you. For her, the ring was no longer the end of love. It was proof that she had loved deeply. It was proof she had survived heartbreak. And survival, in its own way, is victory. She realized something else. Promises are beautiful, but they are not chains. A ring can't force someone to stay. A vow can't keep a heart that wants to leave. Love is not about possession, it is about freedom. And sometimes, the bravest kind of love is letting go. Even when it tears you apart, maybe you have something like her ring. A photo in a drawer. A message you can't delete. A gift that feels too heavy to throw away. What if, instead of seeing it as proof of pain, you saw it as proof of your strength? That you loved, that you risked, that you dared to care? Because to love is to be brave. And to lose is to still be alive. One evening, she picked up the ring for the first time. She held it, not as a wound, but as a reminder. And then she whispered to herself, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." The ending and rebirth. One morning, months after he left, she stood in front of the same wooden table. The same table where the ring once sat, shining like a wound. But this time, the table was clear. The ring was gone. The silence in the room was no longer heavy, it was calm. Healing doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes slowly, like the first light of dawn sneaking into a dark room. She realized that the man who left had taken only himself. He did not take her strength. He did not take her future. The heart breaks, yes, but it also rebuilds. Just like muscles tear and grow stronger, so does the soul. Science backs this up. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. Pain can actually reshape your brain, making you more resilient, more empathetic, more alive. She wasn't the same woman she was before the ring was left on the table. She was softer, but stronger. Quieter, but wiser. Maybe you, too, are standing at your own wooden table. Maybe something, or someone, has left a wound inside you. If so, let this story be your reminder. Endings are not empty, they are doorways. Love that ends doesn't mean life ends. Sometimes, the most painful goodbye is the seed of your rebirth. She walked out of her apartment that morning with no ring, no promises, but a new truth. I am still here. I am still alive. And that is enough. Endings hurt, but they also shape us. The ring left on the table was not the end of love, it was the beginning of strength. Remember, you can lose someone, but never lose yourself.